Welcome to the Veil of Truth, your gateway to uncovering hidden insights and illuminating mysteries. I'm thrilled you've joined our global community. Whether you're watching from a bustling city skyline or a quiet countryside, we're glad you're here. Globe showing Europe, Africa, so tell me, where are you tuning in from today? Chapter 1, The Gathering at Willowmere. The motorcar tumbled down the lane like a beetle with purpose, its lamps throwing two pale tunnels through the soft August dusk. Hercule Poirot, upright and immaculate on the back seat, observed the green hush of willows bowing towards the water and the silver skirl of the river slipping past. The house they approached, Willowmere, sat low and gracious on the bend, its terrace looking straight across the lawns to the boathouse and the moored skiffs. In the waning light, the river had that peculiar English tenderness, Doria ka Canara, a river's edge that murmurs rather than roars, beckoning confidences and fostering secrets. Sir Reginald Hatherley awaited them at the steps, a figure cut from the old serviceable cloth of English law, spare, erect, white-haired, with a face like a carved seal. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, extending a hand with ceremonial formality, "welcome to Willowmere. You will find us a quiet household, the perfect cure for London's clamour." Poirot took the hand with a neat bow. "It is most amiable of you, Sir Reginald. I rejoice in quiet, although, entre nous, quiet frequently proves to be a mask." The moustaches, impossible to ignore, shone with their usual lustre, and his patent leather shoes gleamed as if they had never encountered a speck of honest country dust. One might, observing him, imagine some private compact with order itself. Lady Hatherley, a small woman with the fragile brightness of spun glass, was introduced next. She wore an evening shawl although the night was still warm, and the peacock blue silk at her shoulders quivered as she lifted the tea tongs from a tray borne by a maid. Her hands, Poirot noticed at once, were beautiful and fine-boned and not entirely steady. "We are so pleased you could come," she said. "Sir Reginald has long admired your methods." "They are simple, madam," Poirot returned. "One begins at the beginning and proceeds, with method, to the end. It is the untidy thinking which is the enemy." "Then the river should suit you," came a light voice from behind. Miss Beatrice Vale, novelist and licensed observer of all human folly, stepped into view holding a notebook secure against her hip. She had large, amused eyes, and a hat too modern for the house. The river removes all untidiness, sweeps it away without complaint. One can drown a dreadful many awkward truths in a stretch like this. "Or fish them out," said another voice, brisk and practical. Dr. Felton, the village physician, had the solid air of one accustomed to telling people both what was wrong with them and what they must do about it. He shook Poirot's hand warmly. "Good to have you down, sir. We're all friends here." "Well, mostly." He grinned, but the eyes were careful. Clara, the Hatherleys' niece, could not be more than 23. She possessed the kind of quiet prettiness that flourishes in a green place, clear skin, candid mouth, and a gaze that was brave even when alarmed. She curtsied in an old-fashioned way that suggested boarding schools and dutiful letters written on Sundays. "I hope you'll like the river, Monsieur Poirot. At night it looks like a ribbon of silk." "And in every ribbon, mademoiselle, a loose thread," Poirot murmured, not unkindly. Captain Latham, last to appear, had the well-scrubbed charm of a man who has made a success of being looked at. Sun browned his face to a fashionable mahogany, a white scar on the jaw lent him a soldierly romance, and his smile suggested the world was a place with which he had struck a private bargain. He smelt faintly of cigar smoke, good cigars, and something else, a sharper tang that the river breeze threw up in whiffs and snatches. Latham's handshake was cool, competent, and over swiftly. "You'll find Willowmere tolerable, I think," he said, then, with an almost imperceptible glance towards the boathouse, "especially if you like rowing after dark." They took tea on the terrace, the river burnishing itself to bronze under the sinking sun. A punt drifted by with a couple half reclined upon cushions, someone in the distance laughed, a swan carved an arrogant wake under the willows. Lady Hatherley petitioned everyone to eat, as though moral order began with a plate properly attended. Poirot accepted a thin slice of lemon cake, but before he tasted it he aligned the cake plate, the cup, and the napkin to his satisfaction. The maid who served them, Annette, said Lady Hatherley, wore shoes with a squeak in the right sole. Poirot heard it, and filed the detail where such small matters are stored until they grow unexpectedly large. "Tell me, Inspector, pardon, Doctor," Miss Vale corrected herself with playful malice, "what does a physician observe about his fellows that the rest of us miss? We amateurs see only the surface. Our judge, a delicate nod toward Sir Reginald, sees motive. Our captain sees opportunity. And our detective sees, what is it you see, Monsieur Poirot?" "People," said Poirot. "Always the people, mademoiselle. The dust, the cigar ash, the footprints, ABN, these are the servants of the people, not the masters." "Ah!" Sir Reginald's bark of laughter broke the air. "You will find no lack of people here, then. The river attracts them. Fishermen, holidaymakers, lovers, poachers, the entire British Constitution passes in boats." "Sometimes at awkward hours," said Clara, almost to herself. Her teacup rattled as she set it down, and she flushed in vexation at the sound. Poirot watched the way her fingers lingered on the porcelain, as if to steady both it and herself. As the evening cooled, they walked down towards the river path. Gravel clicked underfoot, and the scent of cut grass lifted as the light fell. The boathouse crouched at the water's edge, its boards dark and neatly tarred, its lock bright on the door. A dragonfly skittered like a thrown emerald across the reeds. Poirot, strolling a half-pace behind the others, let his eyes take their inventory, the arrangement of oars on hooks, 2 long, 1 short, why short, a coil of rope hung with a sailor's pride, a line of faint mud spatters on the lower hinge of the boathouse door. Someone had opened and shut it lately, with care sufficient to conceal the act from casual sight but not, perhaps, from a man who counts things as they are. Captain Latham paused, striking a match upon his shoe, and cupped it against the wind for his cigar. For a moment the flame reflected in his eyes, then went out. He did not strike another. "I once fished a watch out of the river here," he remarked. "Still going, too. Extraordinary. Watches, they are obstinate," said Poirot. "They tick whether the heart does so or no." "I dare say," Latham returned, but his attention had already shifted to the darkening water. He made a small gesture that might have been impatience or calculation. Poirot could not tell which. He discovered, with mild surprise, that the man's boots were polished almost as carefully as his own. They turned back as the first stars shook themselves awake in the deepening blue. The house glowed square and welcoming at the top of the lawn. In the drawing room, a lamp cast a neat pool of light on a writing desk, a vase of white roses stood upon it, 1 petal fallen. Lady Hatherley murmured something to the maid and withdrew for her shawl. Sir Reginald consulted his heavy watch and frowned at the hands as if their progress personally offended him. Dr. Felton produced a small metal case from his pocket, heart tablets, Poirot ventured, and offered one to the older man, who waved him away with impatience that looked practiced. Miss Vale perched on the arm of a chair, pulling a pencil from behind her ear. "It's the smell," she said to no one in particular, drawing a long breath. "Water has a smell like old books, ink and secrets. You must find it congenial, monsieur." "Madam," said Poirot, "I find congenial anything that is precise. The river is precise. It flows where it must. Human beings," he lifted a shoulder. "They make for themselves the little détours." Annette returned with a tray of coffee and small almond biscuits. As she passed, the squeak in her shoe muttered again, a drop of coffee trembled on the jug's lip but did not fall. Poirot accepted a cup and, without appearing to look, observed the faintest paler line on the inside of Lady Hatherley's wrist, as if something had recently been tightened there and removed, a bracelet. a bandage, and the subtle way she adjusted her sleeve to hide it. Clara stood at the window, watching the river turn to ink. "It is loveliest after midnight," she said softly. The boats stop. The reeds whisper. You can hear voices from up the bend, just words without faces. It sounds as if the water is speaking for the people. So Reginald's head came up sharply. "Clara," he said, more sternly than the comment warranted, "do not wander there at night. There are accidents on the water. Even to the best swimmers." "I shall not," she replied, and her eyes, reflected once in the darkened glass, were fearful and a little defiant. Poirot stirred his coffee. He liked that the spoon chimed against the cup in an even, musical way. Outside, somewhere down by the boathouse, a gentle thud sounded, no more than a loose board settling, perhaps, or a mooring rope tightening as the tide turned. Yet Captain Latham's head tilted a fraction, Dr. Felton's gaze flickered, and Sir Reginald's jaw hardened into an old habit of judgment. "Tomorrow," announced Lady Hatherley in a bright voice just a touch too bright, "we shall have luncheon on the lawn. Annette, see that the awning is fetched. And the good china. I will not have the river wash away our manners." Poirot set down his cup and smiled. "But of course, madam. One must always dine properly. Even when the world flows in one direction, a napkin should be folded square." He looked once more to the window, to the boathouse, to the silver band where the moon had laid a path across the water. The river held its breath, and in that breath Poirot heard, as he often did at the beginning of things, a quiet promise that what appears simple rarely is, and what seems to drift may, at the appointed hour, be steered with a firm hand to its destination. Chapter 2: A Shadow on the River. The air was velvet and heavy with late summer fragrance when Hercule Poirot retired to his guest chamber at Willowmere. The window opened upon the gardens, and beyond, the river gleamed under the half-moon, a ribbon of shifting silver. In the far-off boathouse, a shutter creaked faintly, like an old throat clearing itself. Poirot, always fastidious, arranged his travelling case, polished his patent shoes once more, and laid out his clothes for the morning. To him, order was comfort, and comfort was the foundation of thought. Yet even within such order, he felt the slight disturbance of the place, Lady Hatherley's trembling hands, Clara's curious remarks about midnight voices, Captain Latham's restlessness. All details, all to be filed away, each one a bead waiting to be strung upon a thread of logic. The house soon quietened. Doors clicked, footsteps faded. A hush, thick and almost watchful, descended over Willowmere. Poirot lay back upon his pillows, but his sleep was light, the sleep of one who listens. And listen he did. At a little before midnight, he stirred. Through the open window came sounds not of nature but of human contrivance, a faint splash of an oar, the muffled scrape of wood against wood, and, most curious, two distinct voices drifting across the water. They were too indistinct to distinguish the words, but not the tones, one low, commanding, the other sharper, urgent, perhaps angry. Poirot's moustaches twitched. He rose and stepped carefully to the window. The lawn was a blur of shadows. At the far edge, by the boathouse, two silhouettes shifted briefly against the pale sheen of the river. Then came silence. A door closed with care, not with haste. The river whispered on. Poirot, a creature of discretion, did not call out. Instead, he returned to bed, but his thoughts were very busy indeed. Voices by the boathouse, he murmured in his precise way. One tall, one small, footprints will tell me which. And with that reassurance, he let the river's murmuring lull him back to a shallow sleep. The next morning dawned with a clarity of sky that seemed almost insolent in its brightness. The garden sparkled with dew, the roses flamed, and the river shone like a polished blade. Poirot was the first to walk upon the terrace, his attire immaculate, grey suit, silk tie, shoes unblemished. He took in the air with a delicate sniff, then strolled with deliberate steps down to the boathouse. There, the first of his observations confirmed themselves. The earth near the jetty was damp, darkened with the moisture of night. And upon it are the impressions of 2 pairs of shoes. Poirot bent gracefully, like a man stooping to admire a rare flower. One print was small, narrow, feminine. The heel sank just a little into the soil, leaving a neat crescent. The other was larger, broader, with the faint scuffing typical of a man's heavier step. Poirot's finger hovered, then traced the outline. One who is taller, one who is shorter. Together they stand, they move. They speak. He straightened, brushing imaginary dust from his sleeve. His eyes followed the jetty to its end. The boards bore no trace of mud, as though whoever walked upon them had taken care to clean their shoes first. Yet a faint stain of cigar ash darkened the wood at one corner, and when Poirot bent once more, he found a fragment of tobacco leaf clinging to the grain. Poirot lifted it delicately, pinched between thumb and forefinger. "A cigar," he said softly. "And who amongst us smokes?" "Captain Latham." "Ah, my's OUI. He is restless, his eyes dart to the river, he speaks of rowing after dark. Already, the little picture begins to form." Poirot returned to the house in time to meet Clara upon the terrace. She wore a pale dress, and her face was drawn with lack of sleep. "Good morning, mademoiselle," Poirot said gently. "You are up early, is it not so?" "Yes," she admitted, glancing towards the river. "I did not sleep well. I thought," she hesitated. "I thought I heard voices in the night. From the boathouse. It was very strange." Poirot inclined his head, as if she had merely confirmed what he already knew. "Voices, indeed. You have the ear that is sharp, mademoiselle. Tell me, did you recognize them?" She shook her head quickly. "No, only that they argued. At least, I think so. One voice was deep, the other sharper, higher. 2 people, then," Poirot mused. "And yet, in the morning, the river tells us nothing. It flows, silent, innocent. But, mademoiselle, rivers, they conceal as much as they reveal." Before Clara could reply, Lady Hatherley appeared, pale and fluttering as a moth. "Clara, fetch the letters for Sir Reginald, would you? They are in the library. And Monsieur Poirot, will you not join us for breakfast? Sir Reginald dislikes delay." Poirot bowed. "Madam, I attend." Yet his eyes lingered on Clara's troubled face as she departed. At table, Sir Reginald was in hearty spirits, as though nothing could disturb the august tranquillity of Willowmere. "Country air, Poirot," he declared, carving bacon with decisive strokes. "That is the cure for all ills. London is a pestilence of noise and dust. Here, a man breathes." Poirot murmured polite agreement but kept his observations to himself. He had seen Lady Hatherley's hand tremble again as she poured the coffee. He had noticed the faint pallor of Dr. Felton, who seemed to study Clara too closely when he thought no one watched. And as for Captain Latham, he was absent. When Poirot inquired delicately, Annette the maid said she had not seen him since last night. Sir Reginald dismissed it with a wave of the hand. "The captain is an outdoors fellow. Likely gone for an early row. These military men are forever restless." Poirot smiled thinly. "Indeed, Sir Reginald. The restless, they make interesting company." After breakfast, Poirot excused himself once more. He walked down the slope, his eyes keen upon the details others would dismiss. The boathouse door, though closed, bore a faint smear of fresh soil upon its lower frame. A coil of rope hung neatly, but the knot at its end was poorly tied, a hasty job, not the tidy work he had observed yesterday. And then, drifting faintly upon the air, came the smell of tobacco, clinging as if reluctant to leave. Poirot's nostrils flared. "Always the cigar," he murmured. "It is the little signature of the man. And here the man has written his presence, though he would wish it erased." The river, deceptively calm, carried a faint ripple towards the reeds. A fish leapt, scattering droplets. But Poirot, gazing at the water, felt no serenity. For in the silence of morning he heard the echo of voices, sharp and low, and the hidden promise of consequence. He drew himself up, fastened the button of his jacket, and turned back towards the house. His little grey cells were already busy at their work, arranging, discarding, connecting. There was in Willowmere a disturbance, a shadow cast upon the river. And Poirot, who believed in order above all, resolved that the shadow must soon be brought into the clear, unforgiving light. Chapter 3, or the Discovery. The morning sun poured its gold across Willowmere as if to dazzle away every suspicion. The lawns were scattered with dew like tiny stars, and the river ran broad and gleaming, innocent as a child. Yet innocence, Poirot reflected, is often the most deceitful of disguises. Breakfast had ended with Sir Reginald in expansive humour, lecturing on the decline of jurisprudence and Lady Hatherley fluttering to conceal her weariness. Poirot, meticulous as always, had noted the uneaten egg on Clara's plate, the furtive glances Dr. Felton cast towards her, and the uncharacteristic silence of Miss Vale, who scribbled rather than spoke. But most curious of all was the absence of Captain Latham. At first, Sir Reginald dismissed it. "Gone out for a row, no doubt," he had said, as though the very notion of a soldier rising early were beyond question. Poirot, however, marked the slight tightening of Lady Hatherley's lips and the way Clara's hand faltered as she lifted her coffee cup. By mid-morning, when the captain had not returned, Lady Hatherley grew visibly anxious. Clara asked twice whether anyone had seen him. Miss Vale made a show of writing, though her eyes, sharp and bright, darted often to the window overlooking the boathouse. It was Annette, the maid with the squeaking shoe, who broke the calm. She came running from the garden, her apron awry, her face as pale as the roses she had been cutting. "By the reeds, madam," she cried breathlessly. "There, oh, it is dreadful." The household hastened down the slope. Poirot, neat as ever, did not run. He moved with short, precise steps, every detail absorbed as he passed, the overturned watering can, the broken twig along the path, the startled flight of a heron. And then, by the reeds, they saw. The body of Captain Latham floated face down, one arm trailing in the water, his hair plastered dark to his skull. His boots gleamed incongruously, still polished, untouched by mud. The river rocked him gently, as though reluctant to surrender what it had taken. Lady Hatherley gave a strangled cry and turned away. Clara clutched Dr. Felton's arm. Miss Vale gasped, but her pencil flew across the page even in shock. Only Sir Reginald stood immovable, his jaw clenched, his eyes narrowing in a way Poirot recognized as judicial calculation. Inspector Graves of the County Constabulary was summoned. A thick-set man with brisk manners and a moustache of no distinction, he arrived within the hour. He surveyed the body, the river, and the distressed household with impatient efficiency. "Drowning accident," he declared, his tone final. The captain went out for a row, lost his balance, struck his head perhaps, and the river took him. Common enough. Poirot raised a delicate eyebrow. "You are confident, Inspector?" "Quite. There are no signs of struggle." No one heard a cry for help. Poirot bent over the body as it was drawn gently to shore. His eyes missed nothing. He touched the captain's hand, then pried open the fingers. What he found made his moustaches twitch. "Ah," he murmured, "this is curious." In one clenched fist lay a scrap of silk, torn and damp. Its embroidery was still visible, fine initials worked in pale thread. Poirot slipped it carefully into his handkerchief. In the other fist, half hidden, gleamed a tiny brass key. The inspector grunted. Trinkets. He must have grabbed at something while struggling in the water. Poirot straightened, immaculate, unruffled. Perhaps. But one does not, I think, clutch so firmly at a lady's handkerchief whilst one drowns. Nor does one retain a key when the river seizes one. Non, Monsieur l'Inspector, these things, they tell a story. Sir Reginald's voice cut across the murmurs. Enough of this speculation. The man is dead. We must show respect, not indulge in theories. Respect is due, Poirot said gravely. But truth, also, is due. And truth often lies in the small things. Look, if you please, the boots. They are spotless. Tell me, how does a man walk to the river's edge, climb into a boat, and fall into mud and water without soiling his shoes? The inspector frowned. Perhaps he cleaned them before setting out. Mais non, Poirot replied softly. The captain was careless in manner, not meticulous. And time, last night, was short. No, my friend, someone else took care. A silence fell. Lady Hatherley swayed, clutching her shawl. Clara whispered, "It cannot be true. He was alive last night." I heard voices, then she stopped abruptly, biting her lip. Poirot's eyes sharpened. Voices, mademoiselle? Near the river? She shook her head quickly. Perhaps I imagined it. The wind, the reeds. But Poirot did not believe her. He filed the remark away with the footprints he had seen, the cigar ash upon the jetty, and the trembling of Lady Hatherley's hand. Inspector Graves, impatient, gave orders for the body to be taken to the village for an official report. An accident, that is all, he insisted. The man smoked too much, drank too much, and rode carelessly. End of matter. Poirot merely inclined his head, but in his eyes danced the light of contradiction. The household returned slowly to the drawing-room. Tea was brought, though few drank. The silence was heavy, punctuated only by the scratch of Miss Vale's pencil. Poirot sat apart, gazing at the river through the window. He considered the facts. A body found too early in the day to be explained by mere chance. Boots too clean for a man who entered muddy waters. A handkerchief bearing a lady's initials. A brass key that fit no lock in the house. And voices, always, voices at midnight. Poirot smoothed his moustache. It is like the river itself, he murmured, clear upon the surface, but underneath, the currents are strong. One must not be deceived by appearances. To the little grey cells, all must be brought. They will arrange, they will order, they will speak. He turned to the company with a gentle smile. Miss Amos, we have suffered a tragedy. But remember, truth, she is like the river. She may be damned for a time, but always she will find her way forward. And Hercule Poirot will be here, to watch, to listen, to learn. The word settled uneasily over the gathering. Lady Hatherley lowered her gaze. Clara looked away quickly. Sir Reginald scowled, as if judging the detective himself. Dr. Felton cleared his throat and busied himself with Clara's cup. Only Miss Vale, with her notebook, looked directly at Poirot. You mean to say, monsieur, that this was no accident? Poirot smiled faintly. I say only this, the river has given us a body. But it has not yet given us the truth. That, mademoiselle, we must uncover for ourselves. And outside, as if mocking the quiet tension of the house, the river whispered past, carrying secrets in its restless flow. Chapter 4: Suspicions and Secrets. The afternoon after Captain Latham's body was borne away hung heavy over Willowmere. The August sun beat down, turning the river into a sheet of hammered silver, yet the household moved as if beneath a pall. The maid Annette padded about with subdued steps, trays clinking faintly, the roses in their vases drooped as if they too had lost heart. Hercule Poirot sat in the morning room, gazing thoughtfully at the chessboard placed near the window. He did not touch the pieces, but studied their arrangement as if seeking inspiration. Always, he murmured to himself, life presents the positions of a chessboard. One must know which piece has been moved, which has been threatened, and which lies in disguise. Lady Hatherley. Lady Hatherley entered first, pale in lavender silk, her shawl draped high on her arms though the day was warm. She smiled at Poirot, a smile that trembled like a candle flame. "Monsieur Poirot," she began, "this dreadful accident has shaken us all. Poor Captain Latham, so young, so full of vigor. One cannot help but think he was not always prudent. He smoked too much, drank too much." Poirot inclined his head, but his eyes were sharp. "You seek to persuade yourself, madam, that it was an accident. Yet your heart, it is not convinced." Her lips parted in protest, but Poirot's gaze fell delicately to her wrist. A shawl had slipped, revealing the faint shadow of a mark, round, darkened, like the echo of a rope pressed too tightly. Lady Hatherley adjusted her shawl swiftly. "It is nothing," she said, almost sharply. "One bruises easily at my age." Poirot bowed. "Mais oui. But still, one asks oneself, what rope, what pressure, left such a mark?" She drew herself up with dignity. "Monsieur, I am weary of questions. It is enough that we have lost a guest." And with that, she departed, her step uneven on the carpet. Clara. Moments later, Clara entered, carrying a sheaf of letters for her uncle. She paused when she saw Poirot alone, and her eyes flickered uneasily. "Mademoiselle," Poirot said gently, "you look tired." "I could not sleep," she admitted, lowering her gaze. "The river, it frightens me. Last night I thought I heard voices again. But perhaps it was only the reeds." Poirot smiled faintly. "Or perhaps, mademoiselle, you heard truly. There is no shame in it. It is not the river that speaks, but those who stand beside it." She clasped the letters tightly. "If I told you something, would you promise not to repeat it without my consent?" Poirot inclined his head solemnly. "Last night," Clara whispered, "I passed the library after everyone had gone up. My uncle and Captain Latham were inside. They were quarrelling. I heard the words papers and safe. My uncle sounded angry, angrier than I've ever known him. When I came down again, the library was dark." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Merci, mademoiselle. You have courage to speak. Do not fear, truth, she is sometimes painful, but she is always necessary." Clara hesitated, then hurried away, leaving Poirot to his thoughts. Dr. Felton. Later that afternoon Poirot encountered Dr. Felton strolling in the garden. The doctor's manner was brisk, but his eyes darted often towards the house. "You examine us all as if we were specimens," Poirot, Felton said with a forced laugh. "It is natural for you, I suppose. But take my advice, leave this business to the inspector. Captain Latham's heart may have failed him. He was not a healthy man." Poirot's moustaches quivered. "Ah, but it is the boots, mon cher docteur. Boots that are spotless, though the bank is muddy. And the fists, clenched, as if to grasp secrets. Non, it is not the heart that failed him, but something else." Felton frowned. "You will make everyone nervous with such talk. Lady Hatherley is delicate, Clara is impressionable. Sir Reginald cannot bear scandal." "Scandal, or truth?" Poirot asked softly. The doctor flushed. "I care only for their health." He turned abruptly and strode towards the orchard. Poirot, watching, thought, the man protects Clara. But why? From pity, or from knowledge? Miss Vale. Miss Beatrice Vale cornered Poirot on the terrace as the shadows lengthened. Notebook in hand, she gave a wry smile. You see, monsieur, I am a novelist. We live on secrets. I dare say I know what each person in this house hides. Poirot bowed slightly. Then perhaps you will enlighten me, mademoiselle. Oh no, she laughed, I will not spoil the game. But I can tell you this, Captain Latham was no innocent. He had been hinting to me, half in jest, half in menace, that he possessed certain information. Scandalous, perhaps even dangerous. He said it would keep him comfortable for life. Blackmail, Poirot said softly. Such an ugly word, Miss Vale replied, though her eye sparkled. But yes, one might call it that. I wonder, monsieur, if you already know whose secret it was. Poirot gave his small, enigmatic smile. I know only this, when one pushes a man too far, sometimes the river does not take him of its own accord. She scribbled in her notebook. What a line, she murmured. Sir Reginald. That evening Sir Reginald summoned Poirot to the library. The judge sat behind his desk, his face stern, the lamplight throwing shadows deep into the lines of his brow. Monsieur Poirot, he said, I must speak plainly. I will not tolerate rumors in my house. Captain Latham's death was tragic, but it was an accident. I will not have you stirring suspicions. Poirot clasped his hands gently. Sir Reginald, you are a man of law. You know as well as I that facts are stubborn things. The cigar ash on the jetty, the clean boots, the clenched fists, they do not accord with accident. The judge's face darkened. Leave it, Poirot. The matter is closed. Poirot leaned forward, his eyes very bright. And yet, Sir Reginald, your niece heard you quarrelling with Captain Latham over papers, over a safe. What papers, I wonder, could provoke such anger? For a heartbeat, silence filled the room. Sir Reginald's knuckles whitened on the arm of his chair. My affairs are my own, he said coldly. You will do well to remember that. Poirot rose with a bow. But of course. Yet the river, she remembers everything, even when men do not. Poirot reflects. Later, in his room, Poirot sat before the open window, listening to the steady rush of the river. The moon laid a silver path across the water, and somewhere a night bird called. He reviewed his observations with the order of a man arranging chess pieces. Lady Hatherley with her concealed bruise. Clara, frightened, who heard voices and quarrels. Dr. Felton, protective, uneasy. Miss Vale, hinting of blackmail. Sir Reginald, angry, secretive, fearful of scandal. And in the midst, Poirot murmured, Captain Latham, who smokes the cigars, who holds in his fist a key and a lady's handkerchief. A man who threatened, who provoked, who ended in the reeds. He smoothed his moustache, immaculate even in moonlight. The truth, she is there. But still she hides, like a fish beneath the lily pads. Patience, Poirot. Soon she will rise. The river whispered on, secretive and eternal, carrying with it the echoes of that midnight quarrel. Chapter 5, The Red Herrings. Inspector Graves, having planted his flag upon the hill of accident, marched off to the village in stout satisfaction, leaving behind him a houseful of people who did not know whether to breathe easier or to hold their breath. The river lay as flat as a blade in the afternoon heat, whispering along the reeds. It looked, as Miss Vale remarked with professional relish, exactly like a conspirator pretending to be asleep. Poirot, who never pretended to anything except fastidiousness, withdrew to the small study off the library with the two objects he had liberated from Captain Latham's clenched hands. He laid them upon a sheet of blotting paper as though they were jewels, the torn silk square with its delicate monogram, an elegant looping letter entwined with a second, and the tiny brass key, no longer than a shilling, cut with an odd, shallow ward. He considered them with the grave absorption of a miniaturist. 2 little fishes, he murmured, caught in the net with the big one. Which is bait, which is truth? He tried the key upon the obvious, Sir Reginald's desk drawers, the library cabinet, an old dispatch box bearing travel labels faded to ghosts. None admitted it. Poirot, who never forces a lock any more than he would force a conversation, merely noted the failures, straightened his tie, and went hunting for a different kind of entry. Annette passed the door with a tray. The shoe squeaked. "Pardon, mademoiselle," Poirot called, and Annette halted, cheeks pink from the kitchen. "So, you are a house of order. There is a box, perhaps small, kept, may one suppose, for the keys that have no homes." Annette blinked. "There is a tin in the pantry, sir, with odd keys and such. But cook is at the market." Then another time, Poirot said, smiling, "One must not upset the dominion of cook." He watched her go, thinking, the pantry holds the useful detritus of a house. But this key, it does not belong to the house. He slipped it back into his pocket, folded the silk into his handkerchief, and went in search of Lady Hatherley. He found her in the morning room, arranging roses as though they might be persuaded to look cheerful if only they were placed with sufficient symmetry. The lavender shawl had returned to her shoulders, the faint mark at the wrist had not entirely faded. "Madam," Poirot said gently, "you will forgive me for troubling you. I bring you sorrow, I fear. But I must ask, have you mislaid a handkerchief of fine silk? Monogrammed." The roses trembled in her hand. The tremor passed, smoothed itself into dignity. "I have many handkerchiefs, Monsieur Poirot. If one is missing, it will be in the laundry." "Perhaps," Poirot said. Yet this one, he did not show it. He watched her eyes. "This one is torn. I am, how do you say, careful of the linens." Lady Hatherley placed a rose into the vase with the care of a surgeon. "You are kind to notice. But I have not torn a handkerchief for years." Then, with a lightness that landed a shade too hard, "Perhaps you should ask Miss Vale. She dabs away one scandal and is ready for the next." It was neatly done. The suggestion floated like a petal on the water. A red herring, bright and appealing. Poirot bowed over it as though it were a lily. "Ah, Mademoiselle Vale. She has the taste for drama." "It is possible, yes." He let the idea gleam and then drift. "And Clara, madam? She is fond of fine things? A gift, perhaps?" Lady Hatherley's hand paused. "Clara has all she needs." She said the last rose, turned, and found his eyes upon her wrist. With a small, almost defiant movement, she adjusted the shawl higher. "You will excuse me, monsieur." Poirot watched her go, noting the careful breath she released at the door. He did not sigh. He disliked sighs, they disturbed symmetry. Miss Vale, cornered a quarter-hour later at the foot of the stairs, was delighted to be suspected. "A torn handkerchief," she cried. "How deliciously incriminating." "No, monsieur, mine are cotton, the ink shows dreadful on silk." "But it suits Lady Hatherley, does it not? She is a silkwoman by nature." "And the monogram?" Poirot asked, mild as milk. She lifted a brow. "I am not admitted to Lady Hatherley's dressing table, alas. But letters, oh, letters I know. I have seen a crest upon their writing paper, 2 entwined initials below the Hatherley arms. Old money never writes without reminding the world it is old." "Merci," said Poirot. 2 entwined letters, he repeated in his head. "And to whom do they belong now?" He tucked the fact away beside another, Miss Vale, when amused, touched the chain at her throat, from which hung a tiny fountain pen. "Not a key." By tea-time the house had arranged itself into an uneasy tableau, Lady Hatherley remote, Clara pale, Dr. Felton attentive, Sir Reginald encastled in the library, Miss Vale scribbling like a cheerful gowl, and Annette squeaking to and fro with trays. Poirot, who disapproved of tableaus because they are too still to be true, introduced movement. He placed the brass key on the mantel in the drawing-room, in a little saucer one might use for matches. To Sir Reginald, who came in crisp with impatience, he said, "A trifle found near the river, monsieur. Perhaps from a picnic hamper, perhaps from a child's box. If it belongs to anyone, they will say so. If not, ABN. It is nothing." "Quite," Sir Reginald said, glancing at it with practised indifference. He set down a letter unopened, took it up again, and pretended to read. Clara entered with a vase of fresh dahlias, saw the key, and stopped. The petals shivered in their glass. She looked briskly away, as if the object were a thing one only imagines. Dr. Felton, coming close behind, put the vase upon a table and positioned himself between Clara and the mantel with the air of a man who finds draughts intolerable. Miss Vale stood off, watching everyone else watch the key. "It is extraordinary," she observed to Poirot under her breath, "how one small object can turn a room into a stage." "Objects are honest," said Poirot. "People must rehearse." He did not, however, keep the audience long. He pocketed the key again and strolled out, down the slope to the boathouse where the river made its whispering commentary upon human farce. The boathouse smelt of tar and dampwood. The oars hung in orderly pairs. The coil of rope was again neatly looped, yet today the end had been retied with a clumsy knot, not the sailor's neat hitch he had admired before. Poirot knelt, touched the tar, and found a smear of it still tacky. "Someone tidy after untidiness," he murmured. "Such people, they are dangerous." A rustle in the reeds brought a figure from the path at the side, a boy in a flat cap, sun-browned and fox-quick. He started, seeing Poirot, and half ducked away. "Hola," Poirot called mildly. "You come to fish, mon petit?" The boy looked wary. "Poach a bit, sir." "Keep the pike down." "No harm." Poirot's smile was small and sincere. "I ought like the order of the river. Tell me, on the night past, did you see a boat? Hear a voice?" The boy's eyes flicked towards the house and back. "I heard arguing, sir." "Late." "Two voices, man's voices." Then a splash, like someone shoved off. "Only I didn't see no boat go out proper. Not till early when the men came." "Do you smoke cigars, mon ami?" The boy laughed, sudden and bright. "I don't smoke anything I can't roll myself." "Très bien," said Poirot, and flicked him a shilling. "For your honesty. If your ears catch more truth, you will bring it to me." As the boy vanished, Poirot stood very still, looking at the water. "Two men's voices," said the boy. But Clara had heard one high, one low, high like a woman's when frightened? Or a young man's? The river shimmered, refusing allegiances. When he returned to the terrace he found Dr. Felton alone, scraping a smear of tar from his cuff with a penknife. The knife was small, clean, capable. "You have repaired something," Poirot observed. Felton glanced down, colour rising. "The mooring rope." It was frayed. "I do odd jobs when I see them, can't help it." A man of practicality, Poirot approved. "And of cigars, no?" "You are not a smoker." "God, no," Felton said. "Abominable habit. You can smell it a mile." Captain Latham reeked of the stuff. I had to stand upwind of him. "Just so," Poirot said, filing the declaration away for the moment when all declarations would be weighed. "And your patience, Lady Hatherley, is well enough to be troubled by grief." Felton's jaw tightened. "She should rest." They all should. And they won't if you go about waving little keys. Ah, said Poirot, not at all offended. But it is the key that waves the people, Doctor. Not I. He left Felton and sought out Annette in the pantry. The tin of oddments was produced with a clatter, orphan keys, a handful of screws, a tiny brass plaque stamped with the name of a London luggage maker, and 3 curiously identical buttons, each with an anchor embossed upon it. From Captain Latham's blazer, Annette said. They come off, I'm forever sewing them. The sea leaves its marks on the land, Poirot said. He compared the brass key from the saucer with the orphans in the tin, none matched. He closed the lid softly. And the washing, mademoiselle? You are, I think, the queen of laundry. I do my best, Annette said, pleased. Mrs. Carter in the village does the heavy linen. There is perhaps a silk handkerchief, fine, with a monogram? Lost? Torn? Annette's eyes widened. I found one in the music room yesterday, ragged on the edge, like it had caught on a nail. I took it to mend, but Madame said to leave it. Said she did not want it any more. Ah, said Poirot. You are a treasure. He bowed over the tin as though it were a reliquary and stepped back into the corridor, where light fell in a clean stripe across the carpet, dividing shadow from shadow. By supper time the household's nerves had tightened into the kind of politeness that feels like a misbuttoned collar. So Reginald, apparently reconciled to accident, spoke of bench anecdotes. Lady Hatherley smiled and did not eat. Clara toyed with a grape. Miss Vale wrote on the back of the menu card and pretended not to notice that she did so. Dr. Felton poured wine and forgot to drink his. Poirot, in the centre of this rivulet of pretense, let the red herrings play around his ankles. He even introduced one of his own. I have telephoned the village locksmith, he announced casually. He believes the brass key opens a portable safe such as gentlemen use for checks when travelling. Curious, is it not, in a riverside house? Every face moved. Sir Reginald remained most still. Miss Vale's eyes danced as if the line of her chapter had improved by half. Clara's fingers closed upon her napkin so tightly the knuckles paled. Lady Hatherley's shawl slipped, the mark at her wrist darkened like a bruise remembering itself. Dr. Felton's fork chimed softly against his plate. Stuff and nonsense, Sir Reginald said at last. A trinket key. I've owned half a dozen. Worthless. Perhaps, Poirot agreed amiably. Perhaps not. He let the possibility stand between them like a buoy in a current, bright, bobbing, apparently trivial, and moored to something below. Later, when the lamps were lit and moths began their soft, hopeless assaults upon the shades, Poirot took himself to the river path. The willows wept decorously into the water. Beyond the boathouse, a fish rose and fell, leaving rings that widened and disappeared. The air smelt of damp wood and the iron breath of the river, Doria Ka Canara, the edge that both lulls and warns. He reviewed his little collection of false leads, the silk pointing one way, the key another, the clumsy knot suggesting panic, the tidy coil suggesting concealment, the doctor's tar, the maid's mending, the judge's anger, the niece's fear, the novelist's delight. Each shone when held up to the light, then dimmed when turned. Red fish, all of them, flashing this way and that in the shallows. ABN, he said to the water. Swim, little red ones. Swim while you can. Soon, the net. Out on the darkening reach, something bumped softly against the jetty, just the river adjusting its furniture. But Poirot, listening, heard in that small sound the echo of a midnight more significant than the last, and felt the hour approach when he must bait his hook with truth and see who rose eager from the deep. Chapter 6, Midnight by the Boathouse. The evening settled over Willowmere like a heavy cloak. The long shadows of the willows stretched across the lawn until they seemed to mingle with the slow darkening current of the river. The air was still and close, save for the occasional ripple when a fish rose or a breeze caught the reeds. Dinner had been a strained affair. So Reginald delivered pronouncements on law and order in a tone that brooked no reply. Lady Hatherley picked listlessly at her plate, Clara remained silent, and Dr. Felton fussed with the decanters more than he drank. Miss Vale scribbled furtively beneath the tablecloth, while Annette's shoes squeaked mournfully in and out with dishes. Poirot alone seemed at ease, though his eyes missed nothing. After dinner the household dispersed. So Reginald retreated to his library, Lady Hatherley to her room with a shawl drawn high. Clara slipped away into the garden. Poirot lingered over his coffee, gazing thoughtfully into the darkened glass of the French window. Beyond, the river glimmered faintly in the dusk. He touched his moustache, satisfied, and rose. "Annette," he murmured as she cleared the cups, "you will tell me, the boathouse is always locked at night." "Yes, sir," she said. "So Reginald keeps the key himself?" Poirot inclined his head. "Très bien. Merci, mademoiselle." He stepped outside into the cool night air. The lawns gleamed pale, the boathouse a black silhouette at the water's edge. A crescent moon cast a silver path across the current. Poirot walked slowly down the slope, his shoes crunching on the gravel, his mind occupied with the little brass key in his pocket. "The inspector, he says accident. But accident does not clutch a lady's silk nor carry in its hand a key to a safe. Non. This is design." As he neared the boathouse, a faint rustle reached his ear. Poirot paused, drawing into the shadow of a willow. From the open door of the boathouse slipped a figure, a slender one, trembling, clasping a bundle of papers to her breast. Clara! Her face, pale in the moonlight, was strained, her eyes darting. She paused, as though fearful of discovery. Poirot's voice came softly, reassuring, "Mademoiselle." She started, clutching the papers tighter. "Monsieur Poirot. You frighten me." "It is not I who frighten, but the thing you carry." He gestured gently. "Letters, perhaps." Clara's lips trembled. "They were Captain Latham's. I found them hidden in the safe in the boathouse. I thought I could burn them before anyone saw." Poirot extended a hand. "May I?" Reluctantly, she surrendered them. Poirot held the packet under the moonlight. Several letters, scrawled in Captain Latham's untidy hand. He read enough to understand: threats, veiled demands, references to papers concerning Sir Reginald, and payment for silence. Blackmail, plain and unvarnished. "Ah," Poirot said softly. "So it is true. Captain Latham, he fished not only in the river, but in the waters of men's consciences." Clara whispered, "He threatened my uncle. He said he would expose something from his past. I don't know what." Uncle was furious, but frightened too. "I thought if I destroyed these letters—" Poirot closed the packet firmly. "No, mademoiselle. Destruction conceals nothing, it only postpones truth. Tell me, who else knows of these letters?" Before Clara could reply, another step sounded on the gravel. Dr. Felton emerged from the path, his coat unbuttoned, his face set in anxious lines. "Clara! I told you not to meddle. What are you doing?" Clara flinched. "I wanted to protect Uncle." Felton glanced at Poirot, then back to her. "You'll only make things worse. Give them to me." Poirot raised a hand. "Pardon, Docteur. They are now evidence." Felton stiffened. "Evidence of what?" "Latham is dead. Must you drag Clara into scandal?" Poirot's voice was calm, almost kind. "Scandal is not my business. Truth, only. And these letters, they are the thread that ties the knots." Clara pressed her hands together. Dr. Felton begged me not to speak. He said the shock might kill Uncle. But how can I keep silent? Poirot looked at the young doctor. You seek to shield her, yes. But why? Out of affection, or because you too fear what will come out? Felton flushed. I care for her, that's all. She's had enough of fear. Poirot studied him a moment longer, then slipped the letters into his coat. Courage, doctor. It is not protection to hide from the river. The truth will rise like a body from the depths. Always. Later, when the household had withdrawn, Poirot remained by the boathouse. He entered quietly, lantern in hand. The interior smelt of tar, rope, and damp. Against one wall stood a small iron safe, its lock simple, its purpose clear. Poirot tried the brass key. With a soft click, it turned. Inside lay papers, letters, bank drafts, and a thin leather folder. Poirot opened it. Within were documents bearing Sir Reginald's signature, judicial rulings, correspondence, notes. But among them, one letter stood out, a signed affidavit accusing Sir Reginald, years ago, of suppressing evidence in a trial. A scandal, had it been known. Poirot returned everything carefully, locked the safe, and pocketed the key once more. Voila! The heart of the matter. The captain, he threatened. The judge, he feared. And someone, to protect or to silence, struck. But who? At midnight Poirot lingered still by the river, the night air cool against his face. From the house came a faint light in the library, Sir Reginald perhaps, pacing with heavy steps. A curtain stirred in Lady Hatherley's room. In Clara's window no light glowed, only shadow. Poirot heard again in his mind the boy's words from the night before, two men's voices by the river. But Clara insisted she had heard one low, one high. Who told the truth? Or were both true? He glanced at the boathouse door, then at the river. The water gleamed like liquid metal. Somewhere in its depths, he felt, lay the answer. As he turned to climb the lawn, a faint sound reached him of a sob. He paused. Behind the boathouse, Clara sat huddled, her hands over her face. Poirot approached quietly. Mademoiselle. She looked up, eyes red. I cannot bear it, Monsieur Poirot. If Uncle killed him. Poirot shook his head gently. Do not torment yourself with shadows. Murder, it leaves its mark. Your uncle is proud, but weak in body. To push a man into the river, none. Not so Reginald. Then who? She whispered. Poirot looked at her steadily. That, mademoiselle, is what I must discover. But already, the pattern is clear. The river does not lie. It whispers. Clara shivered. I heard it whisper last night. It sounded like voices. Poirot touched her arm gently. Not the river, mademoiselle. The people by it. Always remember, it is not nature that deceives us, but mankind. When at last he returned to his room, Poirot stood long at the window. The boathouse lay dark once more. The river wound on, imperturbable, reflecting the cold stars. Poirot's little grey cells ticked in rhythm with its flow. The silk, the key, the safe, the letters. Each a step. Soon the truth will stand revealed, as inevitable as the tide. He smoothed his moustache, closed the shutters with precision, and retired. Yet even as he lay in the ordered comfort of his bed, he knew the night still held secrets. Tomorrow, he resolved, he would draw the threads tighter. For now, he let the murmur of the river carry him to a shallow sleep, his mind awake beneath it. Chapter 7, Gathering the Threads. The day after Clara's midnight confession dawned heavy with mist. A pale veil rose from the Thames, curling through the willows, making the lawn seem like islands afloat on some spectral sea. Within Willowmere the air was equally thick, though with suspicion rather than vapour. Every conversation faltered, every glance carried weight. And Hercule Poirot, master of such atmospheres, resolved that the time had come to begin the delicate tightening of the net. The assembly. After breakfast Poirot requested, with exquisite courtesy, that the household gather in the drawing-room. His voice was mild, his manner impeccable, but there was in his eye a gleam that none could mistake for idle suggestion. Sir Reginald grumbled, Lady Hatherley trembled, Clara paled, Dr. Felton frowned, Miss Vale sharpened her pencil, and even Annette lingered at the doorway with her habitual squeak. Miss Amos, Poirot began, standing before the mantel, hands folded neatly, we have lived these days in the shadow of tragedy. It is natural to seek the explanation that is simple, an accident upon the river. Yet the little grey cells, they are not satisfied. They whisper to me that here, within these walls, lies truth hidden among shadows. And so, with your indulgence, I shall ask questions. They are simple questions, but their answers are. They may lead us far. Sir Reginald's denial. He turned first to Sir Reginald. Monsieur le Juge, it is said you quarrelled with Captain Latham on the night of his death. That you spoke of documents, of a safe. Do you deny this? Sir Reginald's jaw hardened. I do not deny we spoke. Latham was a scoundrel who fancied himself a blackmailer. He threatened to reveal an ancient matter, long buried, of no consequence now. I dismissed him. Dismissed, Poirot repeated softly. Yet the captain was not a man to be dismissed lightly. He held, perhaps, the letters, the proof. Sir Reginald's eyes flickered, then fixed upon Poirot with judicial severity. If he did, I never saw them. And I will hear no more. I have lived my life by the law, I will not be judged by innuendo. Poirot inclined his head with perfect courtesy. But in his mind the piece settled into place, the motive, yes. But the means? The strength? None, this old lion does not pounce so easily. Lady Hatherley's fear. Poirot's gaze shifted to Lady Hatherley. She sat with her shawl drawn tightly, her eyes darting like birds. Madam, Poirot said gently, you possess fine silk handkerchiefs, n'est-ce pas? One of them, torn, embroidered with initials, was found in the hand of the dead man. What do you say to that? She pressed her lips together. I do not know how he came by it. Perhaps it was stolen, perhaps dropped. Must every accident become sinister in your mind? Poirot's voice was kind but firm. It is not accident when a drowned man clutches the silk so fiercely it leaves marks upon his fingers. No, madam. It is a struggle. You know this. Lady Hatherley swayed, then grasped the arm of her chair. I gave such a handkerchief to Clara, she whispered. It was hers. Ask her. All eyes turned to Clara, who flashed scarlet. Poirot noted every reaction, every ripple in the room. Clara's distress. Clara clasped her hands tightly. Yes, Uncle's wife gave it to me. But I lost it days ago. I swear I never, she faltered, tears in her eyes. I did hear voices that night. But I swear I was not there. Poirot regarded her with deep sympathy. Courage, mademoiselle. Truth does not condemn the innocent. But concealment, that is dangerous. Dr. Felton sprang to her side. This is intolerable. She has suffered enough. Clara had nothing to do with Latham's death. Poirot murmured, so you know. You are certain. But how can one be certain, unless one knows more than one admits? Felton flushed. I know her character. She is incapable of violence. Poirot's eyes glittered. Even to protect her uncle? To shield the family name from disgrace? Non, doctor. Even the gentle may strike when cornered. Clara burst into tears, and Felton held her hand in defiance of convention. Poirot observed, noting again the strength of his devotion. Always the protective instinct. But protection of what? Miss Vale's provocations. It was Miss Vale who broke the tension, her pencil scratching merrily. What a scene! I shall call it the Tribunal of Willowmere. Do go on, Monsieur Poirot. You mean to say one of us killed him, do you not? How thrilling! Poirot's expression did not change. You mock, mademoiselle, yet you too have information. You told me Captain Latham spoke of being made comfortable for life. You recognized the language of blackmail. You saw, perhaps, the strain upon Sir Reginald. And yet you said nothing until I pressed you. Miss Vale shrugged. I am a writer. I observe, I record. But I do not interfere. Blackmail is a sordid business, but hardly fatal. A man may bluster threats for years. Poirot gave a small bow. Unless the man chooses the wrong victim. Then, mademoiselle, words turn to violence. Annette's interruption. At that moment Annette entered with a tray of tea. The squeak of her shoe sounded unusually loud in the tense silence. She hesitated, glancing at the assembled faces. Poirot caught her eye. Mademoiselle Annette, you are witness also, though you do not know it. You told me of a torn handkerchief found in the music room. Was it not so? She nodded nervously. Yes, sir. It was ragged, but Madame said she did not want it mended. Poirot spread his hands. Voila! The evidence comes together. A handkerchief torn, discarded, then found clenched in the dead man's hand. A key to a safe where blackmail letters lie. A quarrel overheard. Each is a thread, Miss Amos, and together they weave a tapestry. The net tightens. Sir Reginald rose in wrath. This is outrageous. You speak as though we are all conspirators in a murder. Yet no one saw it. The inspector declared it an accident. Poirot's eyes shone. Accident? Non, monsieur. Look to the boots. Spotless, though the bank was mud. Look to the fists, clenched in death. Look to the rope in the boathouse, retied clumsily. These are not the signatures of accident. These are the marks of a hand, human, deliberate. Lady Hatherley covered her face with her hands. Clara sobbed quietly. Felton muttered angrily. Miss Vale scribbled as if to catch each phrase. Poirot lifted a hand. Calm yourselves. I do not accuse, yet. But soon I shall. For the truth, she grows nearer. One more step, and the river will yield her secret. Poirot alone. When the gathering broke, the household scattered like frightened birds. Sir Reginald stormed to his library, Lady Hatherley fled upstairs, Clara leaned weeping on Dr. Felton's arm, and Miss Vale vanished with her notebook. Poirot remained alone in the drawing-room, gazing at the dying embers of the fire. He reviewed the facts once more, neat as chess pieces upon his mental board. Motive, Sir Reginald, threatened with exposure. Opportunity, Clara, frightened, perhaps desperate. Strength, Dr. Felton, protective, capable of physical action. Knowledge, Lady Hatherley, with her hidden bruise. Observation, Miss Vale, who sees all but tells little. And one more, Poirot murmured. The river itself. Always it tells me something, if I will listen. Outside the mist thickened, wrapping the garden and the boathouse in ghostly shrouds. The Thames murmured against its banks, secretive and insistent. Poirot adjusted his cuffs, his eyes serene. "Tomorrow," he whispered, "I draw the threads together. Tomorrow, Miss Amos, the truth." Chapter 8, Poirot Explains. The following evening, with the mist heavy once more upon the river and the willows bowing like mourners, Hercule Poirot required, that the household gather in the drawing-room. His tone was gentle, his bow impeccable, but his words left no room for refusal. Lamps glowed warm against the gloom, throwing each face into sharp relief. Beyond the windows the Thames rolled unseen but heard, a persistent whisper against the reeds. Sir Reginald sat grim and granite in his high-backed chair, a man who had presided over countless trials but never expected to stand trial himself. Lady Hatherley perched upon a sofa, her shawl clutched tight around her shoulders. Clara, pale and tremulous, remained close to Dr. Felton, who hovered with protective watchfulness. Miss Vale balanced her notebook on her knee, delighted as ever at the drama. Even Annette lingered discreetly at the doorway, drawn by the inevitability of revelation. Poirot stood before the mantel, his silhouette precise, his moustache immaculate, his eyes calm yet alight with certainty. The opening. "Miss Amos," he began, "you have been patient while I, Hercule Poirot, have exercised the little grey cells. I have observed, I have listened, I have collected the pieces of the puzzle. And now, I will place them in their proper order. For order, always order, is the ally of truth." No one spoke. Even Sir Reginald, who had scoffed so loudly before, remained silent, his fingers drumming faintly upon the arm of his chair. "The blackmail," Poirot continued, his voice flowing as steady as the river. "Captain Latham was a soldier, a charmer, but also, alas, a blackmailer. He discovered a matter from the past of Sir Reginald, an accusation of suppressed evidence, a secret that, if revealed, would stain a long and honourable career. He obtained documents and wrote letters demanding payment. These letters, Mademoiselle Clara discovered hidden in the safe in the boathouse. The small brass key in the captain's hand was for that very safe." Sir Reginald's face hardened, but he did not interrupt. Lady Hatherley gave a low cry, quickly stifled. Clara's hands twisted nervously in her lap. "The handkerchief." Poirot raised his hand. In the captain's other fist was clenched a scrap of fine silk, embroidered with initials. At first, it seemed to implicate Lady Hatherley. But none, it was she who gave it as a gift to Clara. The young lady, she admits she lost it days before. Lost? Perhaps. Or perhaps it was taken. Clara's breath caught. "I swear, Monsieur Poirot, I never." Poirot held up a finger. "Courage, mademoiselle. I do not accuse you. The handkerchief is not the proof of guilt. It is the red herring, placed to mislead." Miss Vale smiled and scribbled quickly. "A red herring. How deliciously dramatic. The clean boots." Poirot's eyes swept the room. "Now we come to the greatest clue of all. Captain Latham's boots. Spotless, polished, without a speck of mud. Yet how can a man walk across damp soil to the river, enter a boat, and fall into the water, without soiling his boots? Impossible. Therefore, he did not walk into the river. He was carried, or struck, and placed. His body entered the water from the jetty, not by accident but by design." The silence deepened. Sir Reginald shifted uncomfortably. Clara pressed her handkerchief to her lips. The voices. And what of the voices heard that night? Poirot asked. Clara heard one low and one high. The village boy heard two men. The truth is simple, more than one meeting occurred by the boathouse that night. Sir Reginald confronted Latham earlier. There was anger, yes, but no violence. Later, another went down to the river. Another, who feared exposure more, or who loved too much. And it was then that violence came. Lady Hatherley gave a sudden sob. Please, monsieur, no more. Poirot's gaze softened. Patience, madam. We come now to the heart. The real killer. Poirot stepped forward, his voice firm. The murderer of Captain Latham was not Sir Reginald. His health is weak, his strength insufficient. Nor was it Lady Hatherley. She trembles too much, she fears too much. Nor Miss Vale, who delights in gossip but shrinks from action. No, the one who struck was Clara. A gasp echoed round the room. Clara gave a strangled cry, then buried her face in her hands. Dr. Felton leapt up, furious. This is monstrous. She is incapable of such a deed. Poirot raised his hand for silence. I do not condemn without reason. Clara, you found the letters. You feared for your uncle's honor. You confronted Latham. He laughed, perhaps he taunted. You seized the oar, yes, I found it later with a faint smear of mud, and in your desperation, you struck. Not with intent to kill, but with fear, with impulse. He fell, he struck his head, he drowned. And when you realized what you had done, you placed the silk in his hand to draw suspicion elsewhere. Is it not so? Clara sobbed uncontrollably. I only wanted to protect Uncle. He has given me everything. I couldn't let Captain Latham destroy him. Dr. Felton knelt beside her, his face stricken. Clara, my dear. Poirot's mercy. Poirot's eyes were grave but not unkind. Mademoiselle, crime is always a tragedy. But I see in you no malice, only fear. And I believe, yes, that Dr. Felton discovered the truth and tried to shield you. He retied the rope in the boathouse, clumsily. He stood between you and suspicion. But protection cannot erase what has been done. Felton bowed his head. I thought if I could hide the signs, no one need ever know. She is innocent of intent. Sir Reginald rose slowly, his face ashen. She did it for me. My disgrace drove her to it. Poirot turned to him. No, monsieur. Your disgrace was Captain Latham's weapon. But the blow, that was Clara's. Let the responsibility be hers, not yours. The law, it will take account of her youth, her fear, her impulse. The aftermath. For a long moment, silence reigned, broken only by Clara's weeping and the distant lap of the river. Lady Hatherley murmured prayers into her shawl. Miss Vale scribbled feverishly, her eyes shining with the thrill of drama. Annette crossed herself in the doorway. At last Poirot spoke, softly. The truth, Miss Amos, is like the river. You may dam it, you may divert it, but in the end it flows free. Captain Latham sought to profit from secrets, but he paid with his life. And you, Clara, must now face what you have done. Yet take comfort, you acted from loyalty, not from greed or hate. The law, it sees the difference. Clara raised her tear-streaked face. I never meant. Poirot inclined his head. I know. But the river remembers, always. Poirot's reflection. When the others had withdrawn, Poirot lingered alone by the window. Outside, the mist curled once more over the Thames, hiding the black waters that had held their secret until he drew it forth. He touched his moustache with satisfaction. Always, he murmured, it is psychology, the fear, the love, the desperation, that drives the hand. And always, it is the little details that reveal the truth, a spotless boot, a clumsy knot, a scrap of silk. The river conceals, but Hercule Poirot reveals. The water whispered against the bank, eternal, indifferent. And Poirot, gazing out, felt the quiet satisfaction of order restored.